Hello, everybody. This is Shanan Steere coming to you live here in GSD Collective. I want to introduce you to someone who has changed our world as an author, Brian Moran, who wrote the 12-Week Year and then just recently this amazing book, Uncommon Accountability. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to listen to you speak in Nashville, which you taught all kinds of different things, and you really talked about accountability and what that looks like and self-accountability there. I just wanted to talk to you about the book today and just get an introduction out there, because to me, as independent contractors, as real estate agents, that self-accountability is going to be absolutely everything. So I want to start out with this question. The difference between traditional definition of accountability and the uncommon definition of accountability. What's the difference?
Yeah, great question. So Michael, the co-author, and I look at accountability very different than I think everyone else does. And it's come through our years of working with the concept and working with individuals and leaders on how to perform at your best. And so the traditional experience with accountability and view of it is negative consequences. I mean, anywhere you hear that word, it's typically affiliated with bad behavior, poor performance, negative consequences. There's every day you can find someone on the news, we've got to hold this person accountable, that kind of language. In fact, when you look up the definition, the examples they use, I think 3 of the 4 are punishment. And yet that's really not what accountability is. And so Michael and I one of our quests in life is to sort of set the record straight on accountability, because it's such an empowering concept when you understand what it is. And so we talk about accountability not as consequences, but as ownership, with the notion that we all have free will choice, right? That no matter what situation you're in, you have choice. And it doesn't mean you're going to like the choices, but the recognition that you have choice is critical. And then taking ownership of those choices. Because in the end, we would argue you create your own consequences by the choices you make day in and day out to a large degree.
So when I was reading the book, you talk about that in finance, you talk about that in relationships, you talk about that in health, that, if you go in the victim mindset, that you're blaming other people for your circumstances, which we hear this all the time, especially in marriages, right? Or relationships.
Mm-hmm.
How important is it that they have accountability, first of all, in our own relationships?
Yeah, there's the challenge is the victim mindset is pretty prevalent, and unless you're made aware of it, it's easy to fall into it, because that's the mindset that society reinforces, and that's where I'm blaming others or looking outside of myself. So I'm blaming situations and circumstances or others for my lack of performance or my lack of happiness or whatever my experience that's not working for me. And it's easy to do, because in the moment, there's nothing I have to do different with that, right? If it's something outside of me, now I don't have to change. And so it's expedient, it's comfortable in the moment, but that's a accountability mindset. We talk about uncommon accountability. That mindset's very different. That's the recognition that although I don't control circumstances, I do control how I respond, and that my choices and my responses shape my current reality and my future. And so, as you begin to recognize that, it plays a factor in every area. Relationships is a big one, whether it's with a spouse or partner, whether it's with your children, whether it's in a business setting or whatever it is. And the recognition that I don't control others, but I do have choice when it comes to how I respond, regardless of how they're acting or how they're behaving.
So we're all realtors on this channel. And, I hear all the time, well, my sales are not great because the market's really hard right now. I can't buy a house because there's 20 offers on every houses right now. Like, there's so many things flying in our industry right now, Brian. And I know you speak to realtors all the time. What would you say to an independent contractor when it comes to accountability of themselves?
Yeah. So here's the reality. There's good markets, there's difficult markets, there's thriving markets, right? If you're a realtor that can only be successful in certain market conditions, then you're going to struggle. And so, but this is that victim mindset. And the challenge with the victim mindset is oftentimes we don't even know we're in it. But that's a great example. The victim mindset is, well, it's the, the market is so challenging right now that I can't do much. But I saw a stat yesterday that there were more houses sold in 2021 than there have been in like 8 or 10 years. And yet everyone says there's no inventory. So hold on here, right? And I know they're going fast. I know there's things like that, but the accountable mindset says, okay, those are the conditions I find myself. What do I need to do to succeed in that situation, in those circumstances? Versus just going, well, we'll just see how it works out, or convincing myself that I can't be successful. So, looking at it and going, that's just what is. So what now is kind of the situation, right? I can't change that. And am I going to let my success be dependent on the market conditions, or am I going to drive my success? And if I'm going to drive my success, then listen, I'm going to have to make some different choices. I'm going to have to be willing to pivot and do things I haven't done before, or do different things, because the market is different. And that's really the challenge, because that takes effort. There's a lot of emotional energy goes into that. There's some physical energy goes into that. And so that's why the victim mindset is so much easier. It's easier to just go, well, I'll just do what I can until it changes. Well, what if it never goes back?
And it may not, because
It
right
may
now
not.
it's a supply and demand issue. People
Yep.
keep saying our market's going to crash. We don't see any indication of that yet.
Yeah, no, the stats I've seen too is that housing and apartments have been underbuilt for the last 10 years. So that's part of what's driving that demand, is like you said, the supply and demand, the supply just isn't there. So
Yeah.
I don't know that it's going to change, but it will at some point. And then are you going to be a victim to that change? Well, I just got this one figured out, and then that's the way it works. So, the uncommon accountability mindset says, okay, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to do some things differently. Some of it's going to work, some of it's not, but I'm willing to try some new things till I figure it out. I'm not going to let my success, my happiness be determined by the market. That's the difference.
I hope everybody just wrote that down. Because, 85% of the people who come into real estate come in and go right back out, Brian, because they don't find the discipline, they don't find the accountability. And
Right.
so in this market, like right now, we're so inflated with realtors all across the country. Many will be exiting as it keeps getting a little bit harder, because they're not willing to take that responsibility and the accountability of themselves. So the accountable mindset, you own it. And one of the things I read, and I don't remember which chapter it was, and I've always heard, leaders own everything, and leaders take responsibility for things, even if it's not their own. Yet you wrote something like, you can't take ownership of other people's mistakes, because then you're not helping them own it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not, if you're a leader, your job is to help people, but the burden of perform is theirs. And you need to be clear about that. So as a leader, you're coaching and you're working to get them to take ownership of the actions and the outcomes that they need to create. That's the key. That's what leadership's about. It's about influencing others to higher performance. And so, kind of influencing for that ownership, but that accountable mindset, the piece of that that's very different is it's future focus versus rear view mirror, right?
Okay.
The victim mindset is all about why it didn't happen, why it couldn't happen because of all these things. The accountable mindset is looking back to learn, but really future focus. What do I need to do different today and tomorrow and next week to be more successful, to experience more of what I want? So it's never about blame. It's not about beating yourself up for what you did or didn't do, because you can't change the past, but we can learn from it and then apply that moving forward.
So how do we hold ourselves accountable?
Well, it starts with the recognition that, understanding what accountability is, that it's ownership, and then recognizing, do I really own my goals? And most importantly, do I own my actions? Because I don't control the outcomes, I control the actions. And so what degree of ownership do I have in the actions? There's a tactic in my plan that says I'm supposed to make 10 outbound calls a day, but I struggle to do it. Well, that's a lack of ownership. So what's it going to take for me to step up and own that and do that consistently, if that's a key action for my success? And recognizing that, the things that the heavy lifting that we do in this industry isn't physical, it's emotional. How do I get myself to do the activities that are uncomfortable and do them consistently and do them well? And so really starting with this is part of the core of the 12. You're starting with your vision. What do you want? That's your why. And that translates all the way down to the daily actions. So we talked about in this market, you may have to pivot and do some things differently. I need a compelling why to do that. And to me, that's the future. That's the vision of the future that says, okay, I have a passion for creating a future that's bigger than the present that I'm willing to sacrifice to make happen. I'm willing to sacrifice my comfort and my security and some of those things that I've got to enter into in order to do new things and get proficient with them.
So most people who live in comfort and victim are not near as successful as those who live in accountability and uncomfort zone.
That's my experience far and
Okay.
away. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I read that, Brian, I was like, okay, that really, I mean, I've never really put that together. And yet when you look at these people that are massively successful, they've had to go through a lot of things that are uncomfortable.
And they're still doing it. See, that the fallacy is you do it once. And that somehow people that are really successful don't fear the future or don't have any anxiety about the future. They do, right? There's a great book. My favorite book is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways, which is right. That we all have fear when we're on new ground. The successful people just do it anyways. Why? Because they own the present, they own the future.
So how do you stay in that? You know, you've got this one graph that says comfort zone. I think it's uncomfort zone, and then panic zone.
Yeah. So it's comfort zone, growth zone,
Growth zone. Sorry.
right? And growth zone is where you want to be. So panic zone is that area where you're right. It's out of control. You're trying to do too much. You're trying too many different things. That's not where you want to be. But the comfort zone is just as bad or maybe even worse because you're not growing. And if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind because everything in the physical universe is either advancing or declining. And we're no different. The marketplace is constantly changing. So you can be really locked into what's working today. And if you stick with that too long, guess what? Your performance is going to fall off because the marketplace is shifting constantly. And you can look out throughout history and look at companies that were paragons in their industry don't exist today. And that's how it happened. It happened because they kept doing what they had always done and the marketplace moved on. And so that growth zone is really, really critical to be stepping out every day and thinking about, okay, given the future I want, what more can I do today? What do I need to do differently? What am I seeing? Paying attention to what's happening in the world and in the marketplace, the things you're eating, if it's health and energy, right? Because all of that has an effect on your business as well. Depending on what you eat, creates energy or robs you of energy and feeds your mind or doesn't feed your mind. So much of that stuff is interrelated and really taking ownership of it across the board, not being perfect, right? It's not about being perfect, but it's about, okay, I'm clear on the things that matter to me. And I'm working consistently on those things, not perfect, but just more consistent. And when I fall off, which I will, I've got a process of getting back on.
So when we coach realtors, agents, and leaders in our one-on-one coaching, Brian, first of all, they usually are not in their comfort zone very long because we're attempting to get them into their growth zone, right?
Yeah.
When I see realtors, though, that I call are out of control, that must be them living in their panic zone because they do one thing this time and then another thing and another thing and another thing, and they never really get good because they're not willing to go through repetitious boredom and be uncomfortable, right?
Right.
They like variety, and they're not willing to stay in that to grow. And
Yeah, I
so,
think oftentimes that's caused because I stayed so long in the comfort zone that now I'm faced with massive change. And and the panic zone happens because I realize I don't have a lot of time either. So there's this massive change and this constricting of time. And all of a sudden I'm just trying all kinds of things. And like you said, I'm never consistent with any of it long enough to build competency and to build confidence and to get it to bear some fruit. So I jump from one thing to the next thinking, hey, this one might work. This one might work. And it's not productive. It's not healthy. I mean, it's a tough way to go.
and we're seeing that right now a lot, right? Like, how do I go get a listing? How do I find a seller? and now I'm going to start mailing. Well, mailing takes 12 months to get,
Right. Right.
to get bear fruit. So
And
there's so many things
you should start mailing. You should start now.
for
Right.
12 months from now.
But let's be consistent with it and stick with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So consistency sounds like that's a big part of all of this.
It is. You kind of touched on it. We use the term daily mundane, right? The stuff that makes you successful typically isn't the exciting, sexy stuff. It's the daily mundane, right? If you want to be healthy, it's not about going from South Beach to paleo to keto. It's about eating well and exercising regularly. Being wealthy isn't about one big score. It's about spending less than you make, investing the difference. And that's the daily mundane. Being successful as a real estate agent is doing those things day in, day out, week in and week out consistently, that, where you're building your database and you're working your database. That's the key to being a successful realtor.
And every day, and having a good execution score every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what's amazing to me in real estate, our office is up on a floor that's probably about 20 offices. And we're the only ones up there at 8:30 every day, ready to go.
Yeah.
Like, we have a start time of 8:30 every day expected of our team to be there to go, right? Because
Yeah.
we got to get ready before we go to work. And it's our teamify, it's our time.
That's your
And I'll
pregame.
walk around the hallways and it's empty.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? And those are the people with the victim mindset that go, I don't know why I'm just not as successful as it just doesn't seem to work for me.
Or they go, oh, you guys are just lucky. You just get all the leads.
Yeah. There you go.
No, we're just there at 8:30.
Right. Working it.
Do
Funny
it.
how that is, huh?
Oh, you can tell, right? The people that show up, especially as independent contractors, who are serious about their business, who train, who role play, who do the right things. It is a very distinguishing difference versus the people who are haphazard and you see them on Facebook and they're at games again and then they're traveling again. And it's
Yeah.
not that you can't have fun. It's just you do have to put in the time.
Yeah. You earn that time freedom by doing the heavy lifting. That's how it comes. And I think the reason why so many people exit the industry is they see the time freedom that you can have. And as you said earlier, they don't come with the discipline to earn that.
Mm-mm.
That's the attraction. So they start out with all this time freedom and they never do the work.
Right. I call it the D word.
The D
Nobody
word.
ever taught you the D word.
Oh.
Discipline.
Yeah. Well, that's like a 4-letter word in today's society, right? No one wants to hear that.
No, it's, even when I used to coach and be a national speaker, Brian, I mean, I would say, okay, let's just talk about the word accountability. And you literally could look in the audience and see people like double over, and they do the same thing with the word discipline.
Yeah.
They have a physical reaction to both of those words, which is fascinating, right? Talk to me about holding somebody capable.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so every organization we've worked in, and we've worked in just about every industry, we hear this talk of holding people accountable. And when you dig into that, what that really means is for the manager, someone in authority, when someone doesn't do what they're supposed to do, they create some sort of negative consequence. Could be a verbal chewing out, could be loss of benefits, or, up to firing. And so the truth of that is you'll never get ownership with that. You'll never get discretionary effort with negative consequences. But that's the way most leaders employ this consequence model. And so if you're performing well, the consequence model to some degree works because all you're getting the positive consequences or rewards. But the minute you start to struggle, the consequence model comes in with negative consequences. And in so many cases, they're using negative consequences trying to elicit a positive behavior, which is really, really difficult to get. Right? Negative consequences are helpful in situations where you want to stop a certain action. So your kid's about to do something is unsafe, and so you create a negative consequence for them. They go, okay, I'm not going to do that again because it was that uncomfortable. But when we use them to try and shape positive behavior, all it does is create a minimum level of performance, enough performance to stop the consequence, enough performance for you to go away, but it creates a lot of collateral damage. Relationship damage, everything from, passive resistance to sabotage. And so we talk about forget about trying to hold your team accountable. It's actually keeping them from performing at their potential. Instead, hold them capable. Now, that may sound like semantics, but it's subtly yet profoundly different in that it recognizes that everyone has freedom of choice.
Mhm.
It recognizes that I, as a leader, can't force someone to do something. I might create a consequence that's so distasteful that they choose to do it, but that's where all the collateral damage comes in. So when, as a leader, when I recognize that everyone has freedom of choice, and I operate from that, and I look at accountability as choice, then I start to confront my team with the choices that they have, because they don't have to work here. They could work somewhere else. Doesn't make them a bad person, makes them a bad fit. But what I want to do is I want to coach them to taking ownership of the standards, the goals, and the actions. And so I'm going to continue to confront them with the choices and then the natural consequences of the choices. So if you choose to continue to underperform, right, what are the consequences that you're going to experience? In a sense, what are the consequences that you're choosing to experience? Versus there's a different set of consequences. What would you need to do to experience that? Which one do you want to do, right? Because I can't force that. And so holding people capable is not passive, it's confrontive, but it's confrontive first with choice. And what happens in that is it really changes the conversation. It changes the relationship. It changes the results. It changes the culture.
Well, and you look at really highly producing teams, they have to be about this, right? Like you can't, I think about negative consequences like a parent to a toddler.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned that in your book. It's just, as a parent, I mean, I've got one that just graduated college and one,
Yeah.
and my daughter's in college. And going back to that, you're like, no, right? There's certain things that
Well,
you
yeah,
do.
when they're at a level that they don't have the cognitive understanding, but then we treat employees the same way, adult employees the same way, it's so unproductive. And it's just not a healthy relationship, and it's not a good way to lead and manage. You don't have a lot of influence with it.
So when I go back and think about that, one of my first jobs out of college was with pharmaceuticals. And back then they didn't have iPads and computers. This is early 90s.
Yeah.
And we had the manager known for driving around to see if you got home early. Okay. No, this is true story.
Yeah.
So I was 25 and I was building my house, Brian, and I purposely told my builder, no windows in the garage, and I want no windows on the garage doors. Because if I went out and I saw my 10 doctors before 1 o'clock, I couldn't do any more for the next day.
Right.
I
Right.
couldn't work ahead. And so I had nothing else to do. So I would either go to the gym or I'd go home. And literally, they put such a fear of God in us that he would drive by and then report you to headquarters
Yeah.
if you were
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. Right.
I built a house with no windows in the garage.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. But that's a great example, right? That didn't cause you to go see more doctors. It caused you to just find ways to get around it and hide and
Yeah.
right. No windows.
Yeah. No windows in the
I'll
garage.
figure
And
this
by the
one out.
way, I was one of the top performers. And I saw the doctors all the time. I was very strategic about putting them all in a lunch or,
Right.
back then it was easy, right? Like it was way different than pharma today. And yet all of us would talk about, uh-oh, is he driving around? Is anybody home early? What's happening
Which is a
today?
great use of a leader's time, isn't it? I mean, playing cop or whatever it is, instead of helping you, yeah, add value. And exactly. But that's what you get with a consequence model like that. And that's the old industrial mindset that says, hey, I'm compensating you for your time, not your outcomes. Right.
Yeah. And in real estate, it is about your outcomes, right? Like
Yeah.
if
Yep.
if coaching clients or team members or agents would just go and do the work they're supposed to do to build their business every day, they could be done by 1 o'clock,
Right.
potentially, if there's no showings or whatever. I mean, and then if they did what they're supposed to do, then they don't have the guilt once they go home to be great in the moment
To
with
be
the
home.
family,
Yeah. To be home and be present with the family. Yeah.
to be present.
Yeah.
Um, how do you hold the team accountable? Anything with team dynamics that you want to talk about?
Yeah. So first we would say scrub that language. You're not going to hold them accountable. You're going to hold them capable.
I'm sorry. It
Yeah.
says capable right here on my
Okay,
sheet. I
good,
did
good, good,
not
good.
say it
But
right.
that's good. But
Capable.
that's because that's what we've been taught, right?
Yeah.
So, being mindful of our language, because it's a reflection of our thinking. So holding the team capable, in order to do that, I mean, there's some things you have to have in place. One, you need to know what they want, which is the vision work for the team members. Um, Two, we need to then have a tactical plan for them that they create that spells out, what matters most so we can support it. And then we need to know, are they doing it? That's why the 12-week year is such a phenomenal system that way. Because, we score the execution. As a leader, you've got visibility on the plan. So what they said they're supposed to do. You've got transparency with execution. Are they actually doing it? We're tracking it and measuring it. So is it producing? So you have all the pieces there to hold someone capable, and then you confront them with the realities of, are their actions the same as what they're saying? Are they saying one thing and their actions telling another? How are you going to reconcile that? Right? It's not my job as a leader to fix it for you. My job is to help you recognize it and help you decide what's most productive for you. So again, it's confronting them with the reality of the situation, and then confronting them with their freedoms on how they want to fix that, whether they want to exit the company or whether they want to step up and be successful, and what's it going to take, and how can I help them? Right? If you're struggling and you're avoiding making phone calls or whatever, when I created an environment where I'm holding you capable, there's no fear of you telling me that.
Right.
There's no fear of that I'm going to, there's some sort of negative consequence coming. In fact, it's the opposite. When you tell me that, I'm going to say, okay, well, let's work on that. Let's dig into that, and let's help you with that skill so that you get better at that. You get confident with it. You get competent with it. As opposed to you running the other way and trying to hide that from me as a leader, because you're worried that here comes the negative consequence if I admit that, or whatever it may be. And so holding your team capable is really just starting with helping them connect to their vision, making sure their goals align with their vision as well as the company's vision, and that there's clear actions in that plan, and then just working with them on being consistent with those actions. They're not going to be perfect with them. You're not either. And so, just helping them be consistent and seeing what's working and assessing what's not working, and coming alongside of them. But you're not there to dole out the consequences. Not to say you don't create consequences as a leader and you don't apply them, you will. But in the end, you want your team to understand that as a leader, what I do with you is predicated on the choices you make. You make good, productive choices. Guess what? You're going to get praise from me. You're going to get help from me. You're going to get recognition from me. You make unproductive choices, and at some point, we're going to have difficult conversations, and we're probably going to part ways.
Well, it's just like eating a brownie. I'm going to get the consequence on my scales.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good in the moment, right? It's easy in the moment. And that's the thing about the victim mindset. It's easy in the moment, where the accountable mindset, you pay the price in the moment, but you live the benefits forever.
Right. I work with a health coach, and I have since July, Brian, and she can't stop me from eating a brownie at midnight. She can't.
Right.
It's going to happen. It could
Right.
happen.
Right.
I don't eat brownies anymore. However, the point is, though, she can't be here to help me make every decision. What she has done, though, she's taught me a lot about coaching, is give me the guidelines to stay in it. And as soon as you go off the rumble strip, here's how you get back on as
Right.
fast as possible. And she does hold us able and capable, which is
Yeah.
it's been a cool relationship to have a different type of coach. And yet she still's not, if I go to a restaurant and I look at a menu, I hear her over here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
She's
Well,
not
that's
going
why
to make that
she's got to
decision for
connect
me.
you with your why, right? Why is it important you don't eat the brownie? You're the one who
Right.
said you didn't want to eat the brownie. So why is that important to you? And connecting with that in the moment, so that choice is already made. When the brownie shows up, you're not in your head going, should I eat it? Shouldn't I? That choice was made, when you put your 12-week goals together. I'm not going to eat brownies for 12 weeks. Maybe not never, but for the next 12 weeks. And,
Right.
but you've got me thinking about brownies now.
They have gluten. Don't do it.
Oh, I love brownies, man, especially the soft, chewy ones. Those are awesome.
I make the best brownies too, and I don't eat them anymore.
All right. Well, make a box and send them.
Any parting thoughts about uncommon accountability before we go today?
Yeah, I think the last thought would be, listen, when you really understand accountability for what it is, choice and ownership, it is probably the most empowering concept you have to live the life you're capable of, to be uncommon. And so scrub that notion of accountability as consequences, um, and really embrace the notion of accountability as choice as ownership.
Well, thank you very much for being with us today. I'm going to stop by recording. I really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll get to see you again live sometime soon. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, happy to be here. Happy to do it.